Welcome back, everyone. In this and the next couple of videos, we're going to take a look at report services in SQL Server. Now, report services is an add-on product. It is a licensed product. We're going to use the developer edition, which is free. It's full featured, but it's free because the license doesn't allow for anything with it to be published and used publicly. You can use it for educational purposes, for development purposes. So to get reporting services, we have to first go to the website and download it. I'm going to open up one of my browsers here. And regardless of how much Microsoft talks about how great their latest browser Edge is, it's oddly enough, it doesn't work very well with report services. So let's go ahead and get this. I'm going to search for SQL Server and all these annoying windows. SQL Server report services download is fine. And here it is. SQL Server 2019 is what we're using, so that's what I'm going to download. Here it is. It only comes in 64-bit edition at this point. If you're using an older version of SQL Server, you can find the 32-bit editions also. Okay, it finished downloading. I'm going to open up the folder. Here it is. And let's go ahead and double click it to install it. The installation is fairly straightforward. There is nothing complicated about this. The only question you have to pretty much answer is this the free version using the developer version, or do you have a license for it? That's about it. So install reporting services. I'm going to click on that, and you notice over here, choose a free edition or enter the product key. We're going to use the developer edition. The Express edition is for SQL Server Express, which is a completely fully functional, fully licensed database from SQL Server, which you can use if you have, let's say, small business. Even a medium-sized business can probably get away with it. I believe the limitation is 10 gigabyte is the biggest your database can be, which with many businesses is more than enough for what they need. And it is a free edition that Microsoft makes available. Let's go ahead and click Next, accept the license terms, click Next, and then Next. Install, and we'll wait for it to finish installing. Let's say yes here. And then the installation should get started. It is not a very long installation. It should finish fairly quickly. So the installation should finish pretty quickly. Okay, when it's done, this is the screen that you get, and I highly recommend that you click on Configure Report Server. So let's go ahead and click on that and click Yes. It is, in fact, the server side of reporting services. We'll discuss the client side and the developer side in the videos that are coming up. It's going to call the report instance SSRS for SQL Server Reporting Services. I'm going to click Connect. And this is the screen that you get. So this is the configuration manager screen right here. And each of these nodes actually has a functionality. We don't need to mess with all of them. We'll take a look at some of them, especially in particular. Let's take a look at the service account, which is going to use a built-in account, so I'm going to leave that alone. The web service URL, it's going to create a virtual directory in IIS, which is the Internet Information Services, or server, which is Windows's default web server. And it's going to be using port 80. If you had an HTTPS certificate right here, you can select it and then pick the port, which would normally be 443 in this case. So I'm going to have this selected. I'm going to click Apply. And this is going to take a moment to configure that URL for us and that virtual directory. And it's done. You can see the URL is going to be my server name and report server. So I'm going to go to databases, and over here, this is not entirely very clear what we're supposed to do. But what we need to do, we take a look over here, and there are currently no databases assigned for report server. So I'm going to click change database, and it gives me the option, well, do you have an existing one, which I don't? Well, you can create that. So I'm going to click next. And I'm going to accept everything. I can do a test connection. It's successful. I'm going to accept all the defaults and just click next. And this is going to create the databases for us. So we're almost done. There we go, and click finish. I just want to point out before we go through some of the other nodes here, if I switch to SQL Server Management Studio, and if you take a look at the current databases that I have, and I refresh the databases node at this point, you see that I have two new databases now, Report Server and Report Server Temp DB. These were added by this last configuration that we did under database. I'm going to go under web portal URL right here, and I'm going to create a virtual directory called reports. I'm going to click apply here to do that. And that is done. Email settings would be important in most instances. If you have an Exchange server set up, you can go in here and set up this report so it can interact with your Exchange server. I would have to put the SMTP address of my Exchange server right here. It doesn't have to be Exchange, but usually we're talking about Exchange. And this way you can email your reports. The execution account enable the use of report data sources that do not require credentials to connect to remote servers. Typically, I leave this alone. I don't do anything with this, but you certainly have the option to use it. Encryption keys are used internally, and you can back them up here, restore them, or change them if you wanted to. I'm going to leave them alone. I don't want to do anything with that. You can set up a subscription setting, which means you can subscribe to your report. So as reports become available, that you receive email notifications, assuming you have your email settings set up. So you can receive these various messages. Scale out deployment if you want to, because the report services can actually work with SharePoint. So it can integrate with Microsoft SharePoint. So you have that option here. Take a look at what you can do with this. Use this page to be information about a scale out deployment. So if you're going, scaling out there, going to SharePoint and things like that, you can do that. You can work with this. And if you have a Power BI account in Microsoft, you can actually register with Power BI, in which case requires that you sign into your Azure account, and your reports can integrate with Power BI as well. But mostly, what we want to take a look at are these three nodes, which we already took care of. So once I'm done with that, I can click Exit. And if I open up my browser right here and go to HTTP localhost, I don't have to type in my machine name, which is not easy to remember, and then type in report server, and it is not case sensitive. Then it asks for a username and password, which I find a little odd. That maybe because this is Firefox. Let me try with Google Chrome. Then again, it probably requires the Google Chrome as well. Which is fine. Probably requires the same username and password. So this would bring up the report server interface. We also have, if you recall, that directory, excuse me, the reports that was created. So if I do a localhost reports, you can see that we get a different screen. Now, this is not coming up, which is a bit disturbing. I'll go back to Firefox and try. So this is the reporting services page that you get once you connect to reports. I noticed it went directly to browse, and currently there are no reports for us to look at because we haven't created anything. We'll take a look at most of this in videos that are coming up. I do want to point out that if you're looking at this in a sort of a mobile environment, you notice the menus, these pluses, etc., they disappear. And then it becomes this selector right here where you have to go in there and make these various selections using that. Okay, you have this option to change your view, but I'm just going to make this big enough so I can see everything. Okay, let me bring up Firefox again and go to report server. Let's take a look at that. We'll put in a username and password. It's not a problem. So my username is student, and I'll put in my password and see what comes up. So this is what I got, which is not entirely very attractive, but not to worry about this because you can always go back to your start menu, go down to reporting services right here, and there is the configuration manager, which is what we were looking at earlier, and you can always bring it back up again if you need to make changes to it. Okay. The good news is that report services is running, otherwise this would not be showing up. This is how you install and configure report services. Now, in the future videos, we're going to see how to create reports, and then we're going to also see how to secure the reports and grant various levels of access to different users. But the setup itself, the server side was the configuration manager that you saw with the database that was created, the databases that were created here. And this is the client side of it, the browser, which allows you to communicate with it. There is a middle portion, there's a middle application which is called Report Builder, which we'll take a look at in the next video. Thank you for being a great audience. If you're enjoying these, please share with loved ones and friends, and see you in the next video.